Wow Comic Hour with your host, Andrew Launer,
And Chris Ramos.
featuring guest host.
Matt Schreier.
All right, Matt, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. And tonight we are going to review Once and Future by Kieron Gillen and Dan Mora.
We picked a good one this time.
Yes.
From Boom Studios? No?
Yep.
Yes.
But before we begin, Matt, tell us your comic book origins. Where did you start reading comics, and how were you introduced?
Honestly, it started with Bugs Bunny and Disney comics at the old Woodman's when it was at the post office when I was a kid. I would sit on the floor and read them while my mom would do the shopping.
Oh, yeah, totally. I did some of that. I read magazines
That's
like
kind of
that.
how it
Yeah,
started for me.
sure.
Or where Big Lots is now used to be Cop's Food Store.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading Green Arrow and Batman.
Okay.
An issue of each of those while my mom was shopping. And that was kind of my first foray into superhero comics.
Okay.
And that kind of got me, here and there, I'd pick some stuff up from the library and read like the origin of Spider-Man, the origin of Fantastic Four. And so.
And once you started seeing all the different titles too, it's like, you know what? It looks like there's sort of something that fits everybody.
Right.
And, especially back
Absolutely.
then, they were just throwing stuff out to just try it,
Right.
see what sticks.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah.
I could totally relate to that. Being at the grocery store with my parents and I'll read magazines while I'm shopping. Where are you? Yeah, totally.
I remember an experience once. I was at one of my second cousins' family reunion at the second cousin's place, and they had issue number 1 of What If.
Wow.
And
Okay.
That kind of really sucked me in. They also had Werewolf by Night and Jonah Hex.
Oh, cool.
So I've always had a soft spot for kind of the horror, and I never really realized it until 10 years ago.
Yeah, Werewolf by Night was just such a. To me, it always surprised me when they had like Tomb of Dracula, right?
Yep.
Werewolf by Night. All of those were, and they were just so popular. The kids were just all over those.
Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
With
Bernie
all of
Wrightson
his
was the man.
Creep Show and Tales from the
Yeah.
Crypt.
I
mean-
love the Swamp Thing run.
Yep,
Still right
yep,
up there.
Yep.
And I got the Frankenstein book that has his illustrations in
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
I can't wait to read that.
But in the 80s was like super horror time anyway. So
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, I mean, some of the best movies
Yes.
ever.
Yeah.
The Thing.
like
Right, that's
all the
so near the
Freddy
top.
Krueger and everything else.
Yeah, all the other
You had
ones,
to
yep.
bring it into the comics, right?
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, it did. It did.
All right. So yeah, bringing it back to Once and Future, what did you guys initial thoughts on the book?
Quick thoughts were number one, great pacing, super fast, like read, like, page flip, page flip, page flip. And the coloring, the art in it is really something else. You can tell it's digital, which is fine. Okay, cool. But sometimes it looks like really digital, but this really had that kind of, I don't know, like a rough edge drawing, like where they were drawing
The distortion.
to make it part of the story.
I
It was
really
like that
keyed
excitement.
on that too. I like that distortion. You see that with some of the independent horror titles where they get a little distortion with some of it.
A little
And
grungy.
Yeah.
And the color.
Yeah.
The color makes me think like H.P. Lovecraft. You think Color Out of Space
Oh,
or
yeah.
the movie Mandy. I like when
Okay.
you're in the other element, you get that pastel, that
Yeah.
ultraviolet.
And they kind of pull you into the scenes based on that color too. Like you
Right.
get the
Yep.
idea of like
It's
what's
eerie.
next. Yeah.
It's definitely the color palette matched like the mood or the energy.
Right. And each character had their own sort of palette where you could tell it was like, this is sort of the good end, the noble end. They pull a lot of that noble versus chaos,
Yeah.
Sure. I guess just to clarify, Once and Future is basically it's a take on Arthurian, the tale of King Arthur and things like that, but for totally twisting it, flipping it, and kind of making this evil impression.
It's the story being given life with the knowledge of the story.
Yeah.
Because I did a paper on King Arthur once, and I liked that there are several different avenues that the legend is interpreted from.
Yeah.
And you see, as you get through the book, okay, this is where this tale comes from, and this is where this tale comes from. And it's not always they don't always jive. They don't always
No.
fit together.
No.
I like that.
Absolutely.
I like that because it's all about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so at the beginning of Once and Future, we get the characters introduced right away. I think the first character that pops up are the evil English,
Yes.
sort of like Secret Service,
The English Nazis.
English Nazis.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny because you get like 3 pages of them, but right away you
Right.
just
It's
could tell-
like, what do you want? England back.
Yeah.
What?
It's
Okay.
like you tell they're like sort of a clandestine group, they're collecting artifacts and
Yep.
then they shoot like an unarmed man. So you're like, all
Right.
right,
Very Indiana Jones in
Boom,
the beginning.
yeah, boom.
Yeah,
artifact.
I did get that.
Evil.
That
Right.
whole
We got it.
Right. And you're like, okay, let's see what's
So
going.
then it flips right to Grant.
Yep.
No, to
Duncan.
Duncan.
Duncan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Duncan's such a great
I
character,
don't
too.
know any girl that would ever want to talk to somebody after what happened. I'm sorry. Really? Your gran is calling?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right. Typically,
I don't
not
think I
a
gave
what
any
comes
spoilers
up-
away. There.
No. It's just like, it's different. You're just like, oh, you're really good friends with your grandma. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay.
And Duncan is sort of a I don't want to say everyone in this book is a cliche because I think that's
Mhm.
just really generalizing it. But everyone in this book is fits a certain character type,
Yeah,
but
role,
like their
yeah.
body doesn't match the character, which I think is cool. Like
That's
Grandma
true.
doesn't match what her character
Sure. I didn't think about that.
is. Duncan doesn't match what you
That's
would think
good.
he is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it kind of does play on the general idea of the story where everyone's playing a role. Remember, everyone's
Well, yeah.
got
yes,
this part
yes.
in a story.
Right.
And they're trying to say, all right, we're going to take this original idea of Arthur in modern times,
yeah.
and then give everyone sort of this wacky part in this big play. And you're
Yep.
right, they pull
Yep.
from everywhere they can, every literature.
I like the development of the characters. How
Yeah.
you learn about them as you go along. And
Yeah.
I've gotten into a little further than you guys have,
Mhm.
and you see even more of that as time goes on. And I really dig that.
That's
right.
good.
Just great character progression. And he's kind of serving as you, the reader, and trying to figure out what's going on in this world and what are the rules that you're
Yep.
coming into. For sure.
And so just to clarify, yeah, Matt, you have gotten a little farther than us. We are reading the hardcover volume
Yes.
1,
The deluxe edition.
the deluxe edition, which we love to always promote on the channel here is like, hey, we read the hardcovers. That's what we do.
Right.
We wait till it's all collected. We are hardcover snobs here.
Yes. But yeah, it's,
But what does this collect? 1 through
18.
18.
Yep.
Okay.
and the next volume, the 4th volume, just came out. It collects the next 6 issues.
Yep.
So
Okay.
it's the story's still developing, and Kieron Gillen's still writing the books.
So they're up to
Issues.
24 issues already.
Yeah,
So that's
about
cool.
that. Yeah.
This isn't the first time that King Arthur has been brought into modern or future times in comic books.
Oh, okay.
Camelot 3000.
Yeah.
DC
okay.
Comics.
Oh,
yeah. All right. That's
Yeah,
classic.
That's a blast from the past
Showing my age.
there. Well, and some movies have done it too.
Right.
And I'm always interested in Arthur, like you said, you wrote a paper on it, but, people don't really know if King Arthur was 100% real or just like there was a gap in kings and they sort of filled it with someone that's more noble and more, sensational than the king that was in that time.
Right.
So, I would
An ideal.
understand that. Yeah.
Still
They're like,
more
all
of
right,
a,
this
kind of a
deal.
myth.
Yeah.
almost.
A unification of Britain
Yeah.
and under an ideal banner.
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
like the king at the time really sucks, so we're going to leave him out of history. And then we're going to write our own king.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Make it
And
very
this is-
heroic.
Yep.
and
Yes.
Not mention any of the gritty details or some mistakes he might have made that were questionable.
You gotta
Some
wonder if it
terrible
wasn't-
boy king. Like, all
Yeah.
right, forget him. We're going to.
Well, not only that, but you got to wonder, is it nothing more than a medieval soap opera?
Yeah.
Lancelot
really?
sleeps with Guinevere.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
all that.
Well,
So-
and it had the magician and the
Yeah,
or the
Merlin,
wizard,
yeah.
Merlin, and
Yeah.
and then
Merlin really
his
had
half,
science fiction time.
Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. Mordred was
Yeah.
his bastard son?
I think it was her
Mordred was his
Morgan
son.
Le Fay's son.
Yeah, with his half sister.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because he didn't know it was his
Incest,
sister at the
and,
time.
I mean,
Yeah.
Definitely
You
soap
know.
opera.
don't tell me
Nails
classics
it.
aren't racist.
Old English stuff.
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of like, everyone has seen the Sword in the Stone cartoon,
Yep.
and that sort of plays on the idea of the once. I always kept saying once and future king.
Yeah, and for
Andrew's like,
real. And that's like, yeah, I'm on the
Yeah.
page. At last, the once and future king.
And Andrew's like, it's just once in future. I'm like, yeah, but it's got to put the king in there because that's
Sure.
what the mythology
I
says.
feel like there's
carved
a
on the-
book titled The Once and Future King.
There is. That's the one that came out in like the 40s or 50s or something. That's the one that everyone really knows because the first book in that is Sword in the Stone.
Oh, okay.
So Once
okay.
and Future King. Well, so Once and Future King is what historically is apparently carved on King Arthur's tombstone.
Oh,
Because-
that makes whole sense because
Okay.
they're going from like the tomb. in
Yeah,
here on
because
this panel.
England wanted him to come, or they said he's going to come back someday. That's the thing. He's
right
the
on.
once and then their future king.
The ideals again.
So then that's where the story comes
Yeah.
with like,
Sure. So Kieron Gillen
sort
went
of-
full on
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
like, there
that's
he
a
is.
story.
well, and so
A
then
lot of people know it from Camelot.
yeah,
Yeah.
so then they
The-
want to
the
say that
movie in
that's
the
what it
80s.
is.
yeah, that was a really
That's
good
a
one.
great movie too.
Right.
So yeah, so that book collects four volumes, and the first volume is Sword in the Stone, and like Merlin teaches a young Arthur like he changes him into different animals, and each animal he turns him into is like a lesson. Like,
Sure.
this is how the snake behaves, and this is how the bird behaves. And
Yeah.
so,
Politics.
yeah. So then he
teaches him politics
brings
of
him
the
into
day
the modern day
through a
Yeah.
very
Yeah, so then
Interesting.
that's what that was. But that I think what Kieron Gillen did
Yeah.
was say, all right, so once a future king, what if Arthur wasn't coming back to,
Save the world.
save the world? He came back to say,
Mhm.
where's my England?
Yeah.
And actually, that's probably what would happen if you brought any historical figure back.
Absolutely. Who was on
Gang-
like a conquest of
Yeah.
This is-
land and everything.
Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Genghis Khan's going to come back and be like, yeah, I'm cool with all this,
No.
Right.
I think anybody, if you look back, no matter how benevolent they're being painted,
Yeah.
they didn't get to a position of power
Through being
Without-
nice. Yeah.
stepping on people's shoulders, climbing up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think people just like to idealize.
Mm-mm.
And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Nobody's going to come back and go, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll just blend in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where the England Nazi
Yeah. Anglo-Saxons.
super
against them.
MI6 crazies show up. So.
Right? Yeah. And I just like the portrayal of just him rising out of the tomb and he's like a zombie. He's like, because I've never known like King Arthur just being like evil, I guess.
Yeah.
Just from how, we talked about just being like a heroic figure, a heroic king. So,
So you
that was some
expect
new light.
Clean armor and, pure skin and all. I really
Yeah.
like the way that the knights and so on and so forth are portrayed with the gore. It's
Yeah.
not really gore, but it's
Yeah.
exposed muscle
Yeah.
and the bone
It's like
and in
Digital
one,
blood.
Yes.
Yeah. And in one picture, you've got maggots actually crawling on the skin.
Yeah. That was
And I think it's very, very cool because it's,
right.
Well, and it's also, if you think of it, I guess, literary wise, you have Duncan, who's sort of the pure new boy, and
Sure.
he's tall and handsome, and
Mhm.
he's sort of being thrown into this. And then his arch enemy is, of course, like this, half-eaten muscle sinew
Right.
zombie monster thing. So you're like, all right, I could see them.
Right.
They're gonna battle each other.
And just, the supporting cast of his girlfriend kind of being the archaeologist that works at the library and things like that. And then, Gran, she's like the vampire hunter, monster hunter.
Yeah.
So-
All right. Fill us in on Gran a little bit.
Yes.
That's his Gran.
Gran is, you find her, she kind of starts, she's introduced at like an old person's home, I
Yeah.
guess, at a retirement home.
Her name's Bridgitte, which is
Yeah.
another Arthurian name, which
Okay.
is cool.
And so she's like, oh yeah, I just like watching my TV with my friends, here in the homes. It's pretty slow or things like that. And then you kind of start figuring out like she goes on these quests. There's like a creature coming after him, and she's like, this like weapons cache. And it's like, what?
she gets her grandson to drive her somewhere at gunpoint. point.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was cool.
She's
I also
so
like
convincing. So,
Yes.
she's got that affability to her.
Right.
or like she disappeared from the nursing home and then
Days
Yeah,
at
she
a
just
time.
goes on an adventure. Yeah, she's just,
I think-
oh, I'm going out.
yeah, they made a comment like, why do you keep doing this? You got to
Yep.
stay here. So then you're like,
Like, okay.
So you're like, oh, wait a minute. She does this all the time.
Yeah.
Like she just disappears and fights things.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure. Yeah, and so there's way more that meets the eye to her for sure.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you just she kind of is the storyteller of what's going on in this world and what's happening.
Well, actually, she's kind of both.
Yeah.
Where she's actually filling in the blanks for Duncan as far as why things are happening the way they are.
because
And-
Duncan's us.
Yes.
Correct.
Duncan's
correct.
the reader.
Mhm.
And she makes many, many references to the knowledge of the story
Right.
is what is causing this stuff to happen.
Yeah.
And the story has a life of its own.
Right.
And it's interesting because, you mentioned they'll have a role.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She mentions that in the story. Everybody's
Yeah.
got a role to
Role
play.
to play. And you don't realize how important it is until you keep reading as the story goes on.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to like, what we were just talking about, the old horror comics and old horror movies. I think it was like Freddy Krueger and stuff like that. Like if you believed in him, then
Yeah.
he was there.
Sure.
And that's like always been a theme too of like, if you really, really do believe that this story is here,
You give it
then
power.
you
yeah,
see
you give
it.
it power. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing. Cause I don't remember in the book, but I thought there were parts where the grandma almost had to like give him a little like Cliff's notes of like what the
Yep.
story
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
Like
Yep.
this is what the character is and this is what the monster is and this is how you defeat it.
Right.
And then
When she was talking
once
about like
that
the different
happens-
nights and things like
Yeah.
that, some of
Yep.
the beats.
and once he gets that knowledge, then Duncan can actually play that role, like be the hero or,
He's
be
given the knowledge and he can then act on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, aside from which that alone is just a great like elevator pitch for a book. Like,
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
do that.
like here's the idea. We're going to pull all these, mythological stories that people have heard before, but we're going to give it a good little spin, and
Sure.
I think that's
They're
what
all very
most of them
classical
are.
stories too.
Yeah.
I mean, you expect it to be Arthurian, but there's
right.
I
Or
won't,
something you've heard
I
before.
won't spoil it, but there
Yeah.
is like one of the oldest poems ever
Yeah.
gets given some life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, sure.
Well, and I guess that was considered a hero or a monster at the time,
Yeah.
And so then you think, oh, well, if that's able to appear,
Right.
then just about any other story is
Because
able
these
to
monsters
appear.
aren't just English monsters. They're Celtic. They're German. They're from all these different cultures that were coming together, and they're just kind of happening around that time frame.
Most of them are going to be of the English
Yeah.
or I would say maybe French.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't think
German,
that you're going to
things
go
like that.
too much further than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see Slavic myth.
Yeah.
But I really did like how much material they're drawing from.
Yeah.
It kind of made me think of Hellboy and the way
Mm.
Mignola draws so many
Yeah.
Slavic and
That's
and
one of
obscure-
Chris's favorite books.
And I just all of this really
Yeah.
great stuff.
Sure.
Well, and here's the other part, Matt. So, like, to just drive that point home to everyone listening is that, to me, when you're reading a comic and they bring up an old character, like they bring up like like Hellboy is really popular, and just bring up like some nursery rhyme or some
Yep.
old wives'
Yeah.
tale, right?
Baba Yaga.
Yeah,
yeah, Baba Yaga. I love when
And
they
then
bring up
you're
Baba
like-
Yaga.
You're like, what is that about? And then you find yourself
Yeah.
looking it
You
up.
can do- yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Same,
Or
you know, great-
Garisku, Garisco, I don't remember how to pronounce it, the vampire. He was a Slavic vampire that served Baba Yaga, if I remember correct.
Oh, and yeah, that's what he was That was what
he was hunting him to get to Baba Yaga.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
like, okay, is that real?
Mhm.
But I just finished the first 2 hardcover Witchfinders,
oh, nice.
and
Same idea,
he's in there.
huh?
He's in there.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
Hecate's in there.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
Baba
So-
Yaga with the hut with the chicken legs or whatever.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah.
like,
The
oh my
house with a
gosh.
chicken leg.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, all right, this is pretty cool, because then you start and like the Lightning Thief, and there's other books that do that too, and
Mhm.
that was a big revival for kids to just start reading about like ancient,
mythology.
gods and
Yeah.
mythology and,
Mhm.
anything that brings that full circle to just say, hey, these are always, because that's really what old mythology is. It was
Yeah.
like the comic book heroes of
Yeah.
the day. That's how they
Absolutely.
explain things.
Right.
And no, it's easily recognized in this book as a major plot point, but also not like you have to like know about King Arthur to read this book. They do a great job of that. Like,
Mhm.
They bring you up to speed, but it's
Yeah.
probably what spurs some interest.
yeah,
Right.
Go out, you're going to rent Camelot. You're going to go watch the Disney Sword in the Stone. I mean,
Yeah.
Sure.
you're gonna, if you really dig this stuff, you might just find yourself going after all
and
that stuff.
people start looking at like, okay, who was all of these characters that keep popping up,
Yep.
and it's like they almost did a little bit faux pas, which is like they introduce a monster and then kind of defeat it, and they introduce a
Yeah.
monster and
Yep.
defeat it, but
Which
it's
is
not
it's a good way to kind of give it like that episodic feel or that saga feel. Like, oh, we finished the saga, but there's like a cliffhanger. All right, let's continue some of those threads off.
Yeah.
Very spaghetti Western
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
Right.
vein.
Yeah.
But they never actually get. You could see that like Arthur being raised is still gaining power. So you're like, all right, you're winning these little battles, but there's still this overarching bad guy that's
Yep.
like growing and strengthening,
Yep.
right? So
Sure. And I guess something just to point the obvious out, it's throughout the whole story, they're still trying to find the Grail. And that was always Arthur's quest to find the Grail.
yeah, yep.
So I found that was good just to keep that overlap of just here, we're still on this quest to do it. Don't forget.
Yeah. It didn't happen in volume 1,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Right. Yeah.
Let's push it off. It's okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because sometimes you get the idea too, or you're feeling that you're reading a comic and they kind of wrap it up, and then you're like, someone thought this was never going to go much farther than it did.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh, we love it. And they're like, oh, we'll do season 2.
Yeah, but I think the way that they did wrap up the first volume, I'll call it,
Mhm.
was good because there was, to me, an explainable reason for the ending coming the way it did.
That's-
Yeah.
It really was. It's thought out, and the funny thing is the characters are crafting the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
so
there's so much. I want to say so much.
I know.
can't.
It's almost like they're stumbling through the story.
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Like they're just, things are happening and they're like, they can't even catch up.
There's a plan in
that's what it
place, but nothing is going according to the plan.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So the other, I know we're sort of jumping all over the place, but that's cool because I
Sorry.
love doing that too. No, I
do that. I'm
is-
terrible
This
at
is
that.
how the
Right.
podcast usually goes.
Yes.
It's just like us thinking about, you know what? Here's another. That's just like how it happens.
Sure.
I'm sure other podcasts have like a outline that
Nah.
we don't do that.
Throw that.
Can I shout
Yeah.
out another podcast quick?
Yes.
Sure.
What's the Next Beer podcast? Dave and AJ, they're members of Beer Club at Looking Glass.
Okay.
I sat in at the Looking Glass with them, and there was nothing scripted. It was
No.
so
Right.
no.
We
That's
try
just
to
how
keep it
it's-
I
genuine.
like
and
this.
just,
This is
yeah,
fun.
be
Is when you get to
conversational.
just
I don't
talking
think
about
Andrew
stuff.
and I have ever written down an outline.
No, we put notes as just like cliff notes of like, oh, we should hit that maybe
Yeah.
once in a while.
And I'm
but-
sure people realize we've never actually even edited anything. We just throw the whole thing out.
Oh, really? You
Oh,
never
it's a
do?
secret. Never mind.
Oh.
Edit
30
Yeah.
episodes in, and you're now revealing
No.
secrets? What?
30 episodes in.
30
we
I
episodes.
should not
never-
have brought the beer.
Boom. Yes, and we drink before we talk. No, the fun thing with it is that you're stumbling through the story just as much as the characters are. So then you think, gosh, if I was there, and that was the other point that I really liked was like, if I was in this situation, there's nothing that's crazy out of line with how maybe you would have reacted. You
Yeah.
know, like you see people like falling and then grandma like throws him a sword or something. And she's
Right.
like, pick it up. And he's like, I can't
Yeah,
pick
pick
that up, you know? And it's like, it's just like what you would do. Like, you know,
Sure.
and that's
The
just fun.
incredulity I don't know
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
pronounce it,
No.
of some of the people when they're encountering some of these situations
Yeah.
and just that dumbfoundedness that they have on their face. They can't accept, they can't reconcile what's going on.
Sometimes they just run away.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that's what they would do, you know?
Absolutely.
If someone was carrying a sword out of the forest.
Yeah, they're
You know?
like,
Yep.
yeah. I love how they deal with like politics and the police in this story. They're just kind of like on the outside, like what?
Yeah.
yeah. So and you know they're trying to cover it up, but they're not trying to give too much away. They're like, oh, okay, we're just over here, we're just doing our thing.
So it kind of keeps going along that Gran knows what the major goal is, because she always thought this would happen someday, and it's happening. So
she's did a lot of preparations.
Yeah, so she's like the doomsayer of like someday Arthur will be raised and he's not going to like what he sees, and so we're going to have to just either stay out of his way or you know, just kind of get to a weak spot or whatever. So
yeah.
And you realize that Gran has made some sacrifices in her life, and has
because she's
put her
also like a
mission-
traumatic character.
yeah, like she's put her mission before all others. You know?
Yeah.
That comes up a lot in Volume 4.
Okay.
It
Good.
does. Good.
It
Pays
does.
off.
It
I'm glad,
really,
'cause,
it really
you know,
does.
That's a really strong part, but it's just for her to, you know, you think, okay, everyone that's a hero, you think, well, they're just a hero, right? But then it's nice when they say, well, you know, my whole life has been devoted to this cause, and I've given up everything for it.
There's a real crux point that happens in Volume 4 where you see her as this badass butt-kicking grandma that just is a monster hunter.
Yeah.
And then you see the other side.
Oh,
You do.
Okay.
You do.
All right.
Spoiler or not, I just that was something to me that was so refreshing
Oh,
because it
absolutely.
maintained the humanity of the characters.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That it's not just a story tell.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like-
tries to ground some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like a unsung hero too. Like, you know, she has been battling these hidden demons and monsters and vampires and werewolves and everything else you can think of her whole life, but like no one's noticed.
She can't talk to anybody about it.
No.
It's
no.
it's just her.
and That's
I mean,
very,
in my
like,
day, I can't
secret
vent.
stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's like,
Right.
how's your day, honey? Oh, shot a vampire.
Yeah.
It didn't go down. I had to. Oh, it was
Like
terrible.
melting down,
Yeah.
melting down their silverware.
Yeah.
You got shot. What happened? I'll tell you.
Exactly.
Tell you
Exactly.
something.
I'll tell you later. So this volume, you know, as far as Boom Studios, I just want to give a shout out to them.
Yeah.
Andrew, you've got quite a few Boom Studios.
Actually, this is like this one and Something Is Killing the Children are my first
Love
two Boom.
that.
Oh yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
That. Did they do Revival?
They have did Revival. I haven't collected that, but I think
that
those are some
is
of the
an
first ones.
amazing
I've heard good things.
story. Set in
And-
Wausau, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
They're definitely one of those companies that don't feel like an indie company. You know, they're getting
Right.
some great talent, some great artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're not afraid to try those
Yeah, throw them
off the
out.
wall
Sure.
kind of things that an indie developer would look at doing.
Right. I guess they're probably the biggest revival was revival of Power Rangers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's their big claim to fame right now. Is we redid Power Rangers and we made them exciting and want you to read them.
Yeah, actually, that is a big buzz in the comic
Yeah,
community.
because
that
they
everyone
always talk
really-
about they're cool hardcovers.
Yeah.
and they look all sweet.
and the story is supposed to be really great too. I haven't read it, but it's like
Yeah.
it's fun to see that they're taking sort of that. I want to say it was like always a campy idea,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they're bringing it into like, all right, this is how it would be in real. Like,
Yeah,
There
there
was
was more
a-
mythology to it. and
There was a
make it
fan
exciting.
film made
Yeah,
on
I've seen
YouTube.
that one.
with-
Yeah,
and I don't remember which ranger it was.
the green one.
The green?
green,
No,
or-
it wasn't the Green Ranger. It was
Oh,
he's like the only active ranger though.
no in it that all the Rangers had gone on except one, and
okay.
it- I can't remember the title of it, but
Yeah.
it was very gritty and
Mhm.
very adult oriented. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Like-
see, I could get behind that.
Right? Yeah,
You
it
know?
takes it a little more serious. That's
That's
what's
my
the tale
son's
of it?
favorite right now is Power Rangers. Or
Ah,
one of
gotcha.
them.
to not have them always fight in the daylight. Let's bring
Yep.
them down into
Yep.
this.
Yeah, and
Show some blood.
right,
Not
it has
just-
that kind of common thing with this, where they took something that was really lighthearted to begin with Arthurian tales, and just flipped the script.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Kieron Gillen, what else was the other big thing that she has worked on?
They have a series right now called Die. That's supposed to be really good. He
I've read
does
that.
he has an Eternals run right now. Wicked and Divine. That's one of his very good series.
read some of that. I've
I've started
started to
that. I've read
collect
the
that.
first 3 trades. Recommend picking that up. He also does like mythology on that, but it's with fame and like celebrities
Yeah.
in that culture. So
It's the incarnation of gods. if I'm
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
Or are they aspects?
they're creations of gods.
Okay.
Yeah. Gods and angels. So
And like again, how they would sort of corrupt or change the world that we live in.
But what was cool in that, he has ties to the music world, so we made like a playlist to go along with it as you're reading.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so some comic book writers and stuff are trying that thing out now. It's just
Umbrella
gives them-
Academy.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
My
Jared
Chemical
Way.
Romance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I want to say Coheed and Cambria did something too. I believe they did the movie Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Right.
I think
And
they
to
had
start
hand in that.
connecting.
Right. So I just picked up Armory Wars by Claudio, who's the singer of Cody and Cambria, and just seen him live. And
Really?
we were like, oh, we knew about his comics and stuff, but he's starting to get his work out there, and they just published a nice hardcover.
Well, there are a lot of our friends out in the comic community too that always put hey guys, I'm reading this and I'm playing this in the background.
Right.
And they make that connection of just making it like a totally immersive experience.
I mean, you can drink beer and enjoy comics.
There you
Yes.
Alpha King.
That was a great way of
tell us about
Yeah.
Alpha King.
Yeah.
Alpha King is a beer made by Three Floyds.
Okay.
And that was where they pulled it from.
This is Nick Floyd actually sat down with Azzarello and developed a story.
Okay.
I don't mind spoiling a few things. It starts out Nick Floyd's brewing in his garage. And well, you start out, you see it's a post-utopian society. You've got these weird demon-looking things, very Simon Bisley.
Okay.
I mean, Simon Bisley did the cover.
Okay.
So you got this all going on, and then you flash forward to like modern day. Nick Floyd's brewing in his garage, and these zombies show up, and they throw him into the vat, and the vat sends him to the other place.
Transports him.
Oh, okay.
And it's this terrible, terrible place ruled by the Rice Queen. Rice Queen, of course,
Sure.
representative of Budweiser.
Ah.
There was tales of rice in their beer.
Okay.
Laying away in Castle Milkor. And as you get to know more of like Three Floyd's beers, the characters in there
That's
are
hilarious.
named after the beers.
Yeah.
The beer Gumball Head is named after his pet cat. Well, in the comic, Gumball Head becomes this warrior cat.
Oh,
And
fun.
there's a beer called Arctic Panzer Wolf, and there is a Panzer
Oh
Wolf.
my gosh.
And there is
Very
the Behemoth,
immersive. Yeah.
and there's the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is their best beer ever. And they end up at the end of the thing, space station middle fingers floating out there in space. So, I mean, if you know some of the beers or you pick this up and you dig it, you might find some good beers. Three Floyd make good stuff.
See, and I, that's no different than how other comic book creators start connecting to their base and they jump from, other different companies.
Yeah. Very cool.
Same with what we've read before of just like everyone bouncing around the other, getting their creative juices going,
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the other thing I want to just really touch on is the artwork itself is, I want to say it's like realistic, but then not. Like it has like that sort of edge of clean, like it's a clean draw, and I think it's the art itself and the coloring. You really, I don't know, it really has just a really good look to it. And I think this would be one of those, if someone just sort of picks something up and flips through it, it would
grab
catch
their
you.
attention.
It would catch you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see people do that all the time. They pick it up,
That's
flip
what did
through
it for me.
and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
It's
flipping
really
through
solid.
and seeing the zombie and the stylistic character creation, and yet the humans look human.
Yeah.
Right.
I like that.
It's familiar but unique at the same time.
Yeah. And like I always look at what are they doing in the backgrounds and what are they doing in between the panels and what are they doing as far as like each page goes. And I the only note I made a few notes, but one of them was the transitions from page to page. So, usually you have like 4 pages and then there's like a climax and you do the flip and it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
And you do 4 pages and there's a climax and you do the flip. It's like, ooh.
Sure.
This one is just spot on with how they end each page because you think, what's next? Like, what is happening now?
It's a page turner.
Yeah. And you really start reading through
Yes.
it. There's not a lot of text
I binged
on
this
each page.
like in one night.
I would imagine. Yeah. I was like,
if you know me. Yeah.
this is like an Andrew weekend project.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Sometimes,
Just like keep going.
sometimes we text each other like, I'm just slogging through this. There's so much text. Because
I reread the 3
some
volumes
of it
today.
so
and it
much.
was
Oh,
2 hours.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
And other comics are just wall to wall text. You're
And
like,
that's
oh,
why it's kind of
man.
nice and refreshing and just
Or it's
kind of
just
spaces it out.
constant super action.
Yes.
Right.
It's
Doesn't
like
have a lot
you
of
see
substance.
so much
Yeah.
of one or the other,
Yeah.
and I like the balance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like a good movie too.
Yep.
Where it's
Good
not too
movies,
much
good writers know how to do
exposition
that.
and
Yeah.
not too much dialogue, but
It's
it's
not like
just
constant
gunfights.
planet blowing.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. It's like, okay, that's neat.
Yes.
But tell me more. Tell me what's going on.
Yep.
So the big thing too, the big takeaway is, as you're kind of reading through it, you are surprised by some of the turns. I think, I mean,
Absolutely.
there's quite a few in the first volume
Yeah.
alone of just like, oh, that's now on the battlefield, or that's on the plank.
Right.
It just keeps introducing things. As one is resolved, I think they bring two more. That's a sort of a surprise.
Mhm.
Yeah. Really, really, really well done as far as that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. He's awesome.
And
all the monsters are very unique and just stuff you don't see in every comic or everything, and just the way the villains are really well done.
Again, a lot of them are literary characters
Yeah.
that we have for so long pictured for ourselves. What does XYZ look like?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you see someone's portrayal and you're like,
Yeah. Different interpretation.
"Ooh,
Yeah.
didn't think about that one."
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I really like that.
Well, and when they show up too, you think, okay, so your heroes here, like Duncan and things, like they are still human, right? But they have just enough knowledge to like not get totally torn apart, right?
Yep.
So they're like one step ahead, sorta.
Yeah.
But then when you have some of these monsters from the literary just show up, it's like the first thing to do is just destroy regular humans.
Yeah.
And you're
Just
like,
wreck them.
Yep.
you're like, oh, okay, so it's really actually a threat. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes they throw monsters into comics, and you're like, it's not really a threat,
Right.
Like, it's not
They
happening.
don't
but
do anything. They stomp
yeah.
around and
Yeah,
knock some
like,
stuff over.
They knock a
Right.
building
Hulk
over.
smash.
How
Yeah.
OP is it? Kind of OP.
Yeah.
Not really.
These show up, and it's just instant carnage. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, you've established yourself as a really, really nasty guy.
Yeah.
And then you realize just how cool Gran is because
Right. Yeah.
he's just destroying other people.
She doesn't get nervous.
No.
Sure.
She's like,
yeah,
okay,
we were
well-
talking about in the pre-show, like it'd be cool to see like a prequel comic
Yes.
or a spin-off.
I
or just
really
the tales
think
growing
there's
up with her.
something to be said for developing that.
Yeah. Well, like we briefly mentioned Umbrella Academy, there's a lot of different little offshoots, little rabbit trails that they can do.
I've
on
seen
that.
a couple of
Tons of stuff.
when I picked up that volume 4 this last week, there were 2 bound volumes of Umbrella Academy tales.
Yeah.
Like
Tales
offshoot
of Umbrella Academy.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was called.
Yep, I have those too, and that is to me it's a very interesting story because it kind of takes like the X-Men and sort of puts it on its head and changes things up a little bit. And so I like when they kind of take what is considered a genre and then just throw it
Absolutely
in the
love
blender,
it. Absolutely.
Same
love it.
thing here. They just take these, throw it in the blender, and
Yeah.
great story that came out from that.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you happen to be flipping through it, I think you'll be caught.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Pick it up. It's definitely worth it.
Right. Last question I got for you guys. This is a fun one. What voice actors or actors would you have portray some of the characters seen in the book? If you could
Boy.
fan cast, do some fan cast.
Are we supposed to say Jeremy Irons because he's in everything? Like he has to be in part of these.
Sure. Like
it's gotta
when I'm thinking about Gran, I think of like Helen Mirren. I want to
be.
see Helen Mirren do that.
Yeah.
I almost want somebody who's a little more unassuming though.
Oh, okay.
Because she does. The visual is she's small and
Yeah.
she's petite. She
Sure.
seems frail, but she's wiry.
Mm,
So I don't know.
yeah.
It's kind of like when you like. Well, if you took Helen Mirren, or like,
Yeah.
oh, Betty White, that would be.
Oh
great.
my God.
That would be
Betty
great.
White would be
See
awesome.
Betty White. Oh
She
my
would be
God.
great.
Or
Yeah.
the oldest one from Golden Girls. What was her name?
Oh, yeah. I could picture her.
You know, she
Yeah.
B. Arthur's character's mother.
The older
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
just have her going along. It's sort of like when Yoda threw his cane aside and just went crazy. It'd be
Right.
like,
I mean, it
have
doesn't
someone
have,
Yeah.
totally
it
frail.
doesn't have to be somebody old either. Thinking
Sure.
Princess Bride.
Oh.
Was it who was Billy Crystal's wife's? Not Carol Kane.
Oh yes, her with the
You know who I'm
the
talking
magic
about.
balls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have
And-
fun storming the castle.
Yeah.
yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
It would be great to just have someone who just looks frail and old and then just launches into like
Yes.
Sure. Just,
Totally
And has
badass
that
character.
that youthfulness to them.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. All right. Who would you have as Duncan?
I wouldn't pick any of the newer guys. like, you know, like,
Sure.
Chris Hemsworth or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. I would think you've got to have, because in this comic, he looks like he's almost like a tall software engineer or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
The guy that just played in Reacher.
Oh, yeah, you were
With
watching that. Yeah,
if
yeah.
you dye
Yeah.
his hair orange, you make him a ginger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he
Reacher.
has that Boy Scout quality to him. You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was almost too clean for
yes,
that show.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like people see him as like, oh, look at you. You know, you're like a bodybuilder guy or whatever.
Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Yeah, his name's kind of weird too.
Pritchman?
He was in Titans. That was a great show.
Oh, yeah. The guy who played that.
He played Hawk in Titans.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he was good.
Oh,
at that.
yes. Yeah, he was excellent. Oh,
Yep.
such a. Alan Richardson.
Alan Richardson. Yeah.
Okay.
Richardson. Sorry.
Richardson.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd be cool. All right.
And just about any of the others, like Catherine Zeta-Jones, maybe as the, you know.
Oh, his wife.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Really, you know, this story would flow very easily into some great Netflix show or
Absolutely.
something like that. It would be a
Yeah.
definite tie.
Yeah.
And especially now with shows being in the top 10 like Witcher
Yeah.
and just
A lot of
anything
fantasy
jumping up.
with Will Smith. a few
Yeah,
years
that was
back.
good.
Yeah, that was
There was
great.
some real
That.
great storytelling that could have been explored there.
Mhm.
Bright, I always thought they should have come out with something extra because when you watched Bright, it was not what you thought it was going to
No.
be. It was just
Mhm.
like, whoa, this is up there, adult, like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pretty
it's
serious.
it's very intellectual too. It's not
Yeah.
just throw something out there. There was like
And they-
underpinnings.
They pull
themes.
down race and they pull down.
Yeah.
like,
Right.
This
Absolutely.
isn't your
Right.
land.
I think they have an animated spin-off to that, but
Oh,
I
haven't
don't
seen
know
that.
if it
I'll
was
have to look
as
into
good.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of, you know, when you guys read Once in Future, just see if you feel that sort of racial divide, sort of this is our land and everyone that is
It's
not.
like class and race both
Yeah.
kind of come
Right.
into
It's
play.
a very underlying theme, but it comes up.
and I mean the theme of the king and the land are one.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes to ownership
Yeah.
of the land, and it's an island.
Right.
So you have to think about how you're constricted by water all around, and that creates more of the tension.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I've always thought too, you know, just generally speaking, you know, Great Britain has such a long history
Yeah.
of just
Yep.
straight British, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then even if they started making a gradual change, you still have this deep rooted history of just straight
Right.
British.
And how
you know?
does the affect
like
the culture
straight
and
Russian
generations
or straight
and
Chinese.
all that.
And
There's a-
yeah, same idea.
There's a movie that kind of speaks on that. Attack the Block. It's a sci-fi.
Attack the Block.
Attack the Block.
Hmm.
It's in London. There's an alien invasion, and you've got some racial class differences that people got to put aside to contend with that. So
Okay.
it's not the first time I've seen that, but I like that they did pull that.
Yeah. Well, because that was part of the mythology of it too. It was like, you know, you're bringing back the most English mythological
Yep.
king
Mhm.
that everyone knows the story, you
Yeah.
know? And, you know, if King Arthur did come back, so to say, and say, here's Excalibur, and I mean, everyone knows that myth. And that's just great to bring it right into modern comics and say, this is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we thought this was a excellent read, and it was really fun. It was probably one of my favorite reads that I've had in the past, I don't know, 5-6 months. It really, I just keep turning the page, and I want to read more, and I can't wait to.
Yeah, if you're working through a long read of some other really, really slow comic and you're like, gosh, I need something refreshing and that's
Yeah.
just a break,
Yeah.
take this. It's
Absolutely.
a palate cleanser.
Yes, we always
Absolutely.
enjoy a good palate cleanser for sure. And we definitely recommend picking it up if you can find it in the hardcover collection.
There's only volume 1 right now.
No, there's only volume 1 right now. Otherwise, they have several trade paperbacks you can pick up as well. So
Awesome.
that's another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. We're signing off. And this has been Andrew Glonner
And Chris Ramos.
and
Matt Schreier.
signing off.